Hi everyone, I'm Caroline McKinnon from the Inclusive Research Collective, and I'd like to welcome you to the third event of the Small Talks for Big Change series. These events are a collaboration between the Perivoli Africa Research Centre and the Inclusive Research Collective, and they are a series of 6 sessions where we begin to look at the layers of power imbalances between research collaborations between the global north and researchers in the African continent. These events are being recorded for colleagues who can't attend live, and if you missed the first 2 events in the series, we will be sharing the links to those recordings with you, and they also have closed captions available in English or French. If you would like closed captions for this live event, please do click on the button at the bottom of your screen, which says CC, Show Captions, to enable this. And we recognise the importance of honest conversations within this space, but as a polite notice, we do expect our speakers and other attendees to be treated with respect at all times. Failure to do this will result in you being removed from the session. And if you have any questions, please do put those in the Q&A or the chat for afterwards. So today we very warmly welcome Dr. Divine Fuh, who is our speaker today. Divine has a BSc Honours in Journalism and Mass Communication and Political Science from University of Boa in Cameroon, MA in Developmental Studies from the University of Botswana, and a PhD in Social Anthropology from the University of Basel in Switzerland. Divine has taught in universities in Switzerland, South Africa, Brazil, and Japan, and has been a visiting fellow in universities in Germany and the Netherlands, and is currently an associate professor of social anthropology at the University of Cape Town. And Divine is also the director of the Institute for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town, and is joining us today from very sunny Oxford. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day, Divine, to come and talk to us today. And I'm going to very briefly pass over to Isabella, who will explain which layer of power imbalance we're going to be discussing today. I'll pass to you, Isabella.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and welcome everybody, and welcome to you, Divine, a very, very warm welcome. So as Caroline has already mentioned, we have organized this seminar series to speak to the various layers of imbalances in power in the production of scientific knowledge, imbalances that come to bear and manifest in research collaborations between scholars, institutions in the continent of Africa and those outside of it. And I'm going to just show you a figure that we use as a heuristic to think about these power imbalances. And you need to tell me if you can see.
Yes, we can see that. Thank you.
Okay. So in the first talk of this series, I gave an overview of how we think about these various imbalances and how they interact with one another. In the second talk, we had Catherine Chubutunji from APHRC in Nairobi speak very much to the outermost layer of these symmetries in collaboration agreements or practical collaboration arrangements in terms of the division of labor, decision-making over agendas, budgets, what to do with samples, what to do with data, etc., and access to rewards, in particular authorship on publications, as well as capacity strengthening and the direction that that capacity strengthening usually takes. Today, we're going to go to the core of these power imbalances, because these practical collaboration arrangements on the outer layer here are very much a symptom of, a manifestation of much deeper lying power imbalances. And at the core are imbalances in the sphere of epistemologies, in the sphere of language that's used for the production of scientific knowledge, and in the sphere of theories and concepts, Western-centric theories and concepts that really dominate in the production of scientific knowledge. And it is those layers of imbalance that Divine will now speak to us to. So I'm going to stop here and hand over to you, Divine, and welcome you very much once more. And thanks for coming. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Isabella, for the invitation and the introduction. Thank you very much, Caroline, for the invitation. And thank you, Ayub, Susie, and also Rob and colleagues at Park, and also the University of Bristol, with whom we have been working for the past 3-4 years around these questions of transformative collaborations and also knowledge production, grounded in debates around decolonization and also decoloniality and also feminist thinking, and what it means to rethink questions around development, however we think about it. And also I should thank colleagues in the audience who have made time, to be here. I always like to start by saying that I don't think I'm the right person always to make this kind of intervention, because the more I learn, the more I get confused, and the more I see that there is a lot more to learn. And also I think that there are lots of experts and colleagues who for so many years have been engaging with these questions, which is very important, to acknowledge. So there's two things. Over the past year, actually, I have become very interested in the question about what happens after a radical critique of the status quo, or what happens when an orthodoxy fails, or what happens when a system fails, what happens after decolonization, what happens after decoloniality, and what happens if and when patriarchy disappears, what happens when an oppressive system disappears. We've seen across the world, and in this case, I want to emphasize the African continent, what happens when a dictatorial system lasts for so long and collapses, and that it leads again to a series of other collapses within the system and takes long to rebuild, which I think gives us signs and insights into the possibilities of what could happen after an oppressive system like what we are experiencing in global knowledge production in the university, or global scientific knowledge production would happen, that the a potential for the system to find itself trapped in these many years of violence, of chaos, is very ripe. And I think we have to begin to think about what we need to put in place to ensure that we do not reproduce or find ourselves caught, in this cycle of violence, and a cycle of structural violence, cycle of systemic violence, and a cycle, if we think with Sabelo and Ndlovu Agacheni, who writes about epistemic freedom and also around decolonization, that we would be trapped in this a cycle of epistemic violence that would happen. And I think it is catastrophic for everyone globally. It is catastrophic, I like to say, especially for the North and the West first, and then it is catastrophic for everyone else, precisely also because, the rest of the world actually has learned over years to deal with catastrophe, as we have seen with the COVID-19 and many other disasters. So really, this push for, I think, a transformative research partnerships, and this push for equitable research partnerships, or this push for what one might call on the one hand, universal, a community to produce knowledge, or as if you use Mignolo, a pluriversal, on Escobar, a pluriversal community to produce knowledge. I think it's productive and constructive for everyone. It is to ensure that we make the link with the previous talk, and is that there's a link between what I continue to emphasize as a link between the ontological and the epistemological project, that a link between what I call the human dignity project and the epistemological project, because this epistemological project, I believe, has no other purpose but to ensure that we live and inhabit a more dignified world. We inhabit a world that makes things possible for everyone. And unlike the critique that the decolonization and the decoloniality project is actually around narrow nationalism, I think what it does is actually open up the world to us in a way that we can inhabit the world and make it possible for everyone else to inhabit, if we use a framing from Felwine Sarr. And that is why I think I ask what happens after decolonization and what happens after decoloniality. And to respond to this question, I take myself back to trace, to really go back to look at where this critique has come from, how this critique has evolved over time, and the insights, epistemological insights that have emerged out of these critiques that we could possibly borrow from in order to resolve the challenge that we face today. In 2020, I remember saying, especially after the events that happened in the US, that there is a thing around the neck of knowledge production on the continent and on the African continent, and a thing around, or a knee around the neck, or a knee on the neck, on the head of African epistemologies, of global epistemologies, because they are not inclusive. In a way, they constrain thinking, they constrain imagination, because they do not allow for this pluriversal world, because one part of the continent has to produce data, and the other part of the continent has to produce theory that would be applied, to the other side. So, however we consider the flows, these are one-way flows. So they are one-way flows of theory or epistemologies, from the north to the south, and then from the south to the north, it's where we produce raw material. And I think we have seen this. Even if we look at it within spaces in the north, and we look at, or in the west, where you have women excluded, you have other experiences that are excluded within the same borders. I think this is not something that we need to emphasize, quite much. But I like to build on a certain insights that I think provide us with a way forward to think about how to ground these collaborative partnerships in epistemological insights. And when we ask how do we move after an oppressive system, and what happens after a decoloniality, and how do we ground this in epistemological insights, I start from Mudimbe, and Mudimbe, who emphasizes the colonial library. And the colonial library, for me, is both a problem and then a solution. And from the colonial library, I always talk about a virus, and that the colonial library is, which is a sum total of all the information that's been produced about the place, which allows, ensures that the continent pre-exists itself, means that one is unable to to think, one is unable to aspire without locating oneself within this body of knowledge, within this archive that has been presented, to us. But it means that we have to live with something that is problematic, but we have to find ways of living with this thing. And here I often use the metaphor of the virus and its host, that a virus, when you inject a vaccine, is not necessarily that you want to end the life of the virus or end the life of the host. You're creating a codependent relationship. So the question I think we are trying to push for is how to create this codependent relationship. And I think Modimbe is telling us that we cannot run away from the father's odor or from the father's smell. And we have to find ways of either finding new smells or living with the father's smell. The other thinking that I think for me is very crucial for finding a solution or finding a way to ground ourselves in thinking that allows us to deal with this equitable, this question of inequitable partnerships is the work of Pauline Otonji, who emphasizes extroversion, that our existence cannot be continuously or eternally extroverted, to be living and surviving for other spaces. On the one side, he says it's very important, something that we cannot escape, because to be part of a global community means that you have to be part of its circuits of value. But on the other side, I think what it does is to push us to ask how else we find ways of extroversion. And he lists a number of ways, and one of those is through funding mechanisms and through research collaborations, that ensure that, as we have seen in the development space, that research work on the continent is mainly funded through development assistance. And also, when you look at research and development assistance, it is 3% of the funding in development assistance that goes towards research. So that's quite small. I mean, and also this research mainly emphasizes foreign policy priorities. So all of this is extroverted. The whole of that sector is extroverted. So, and it also limits people's freedom, to think. And I think really transformative partnerships, and also the charter that we are trying to push for, is to really respond to this question around extroversion, because extroversion is first and foremost, I think, very dangerous and problematic for people in the South, but it's also problematic for people globally, because it really excludes certain ways and certain kinds of thinking and certain discoveries, because I like to say we apply the logic of slavery to constrain work in particular spaces, so people cannot aspire beyond certain frameworks. But ultimately, I think what we are trying to do is to respond to the critique and also a suggestion by Eliseo Macamo, who emphasizes and insists that we need to look for scientific vocabularies, for other scientific conceptual vocabularies that make local experiences intelligible. So I don't think this can happen without rethinking these transformative partnerships, that we need to be able to make sure that we expand people's circuits of ideological values, because these are trapped within our own circuits of value. To use a concept from the Nigerian scholar Hari Garuba, who really pushes that to respond to this question and to also respond to the trap of translation. We need to create new circuits of value, but we can only do this if we find scientific conceptual vocabularies that make these experiences intelligible in those particular contexts. So I think that the transformative partnerships that we are trying to do is to push that we should expand the circuits of value. You know, we should expand. We should give people the opportunity to find these conceptual vocabularies that will make their experiences intelligible. But because making the experiences intelligible and finding concepts is not just important for them, but it is also important for us. And by us, I mean us in the North and us in the West, because we are able to understand and find other ways, you know, through which we can inhabit the world as a collective, you know. And then to wrap that up, I think it is important when one asks the question, what happens after the decoloniality and what we do with transformative partnerships, that a feminist thinking, and here I'm talking really around African feminist thinking, is really key for dealing with a lot of these issues that we are now activating. So if you look at Oyeronke's work around the invention of women, not that she's denying gender relations, but really asking us to find these conceptual vocabularies that make experiences intelligible in particular spaces, and that this cannot happen unless we are able to acknowledge that, to use a term from Achille Mbembe, to expand our knowledge archives. We are unable to help or resolve the issues that the kinds of issues that or find conceptual vocabularies that should resolve our everyday issues. If Eliseo Makamo recently during COVID-19, for example, raised the question about how we responded to COVID-19 through our understanding of what crisis is, which was an understanding from Europe's response, anxieties about uncertainty, and what it means to apply different concepts of how people respond to uncertainty, you know, to particular events, and that there's a lot, you know, to learn from other spaces. And in the end, I think what I think we are trying to do here, I think, is to enrich thinking, to enrich science, to enrich praxis, to be able to improve lives by ensuring that we allow different ways of framing and also different ways of understanding the world to flourish and not to deprovincialize, to find the third space that post-colonial scholars have spoken about, to get into a hybridization where we can find convivial knowledge, convivial scholarship, where as a collective we are able to exchange, to be able to balance and imagine the world through a pluriversal frameworks. So I can pause for there for now. Karen.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for that insight. And I'm so pleased to hear that you get confused with decolonizing as well, because the more I look into it, the more I realize I don't know anything at all. I have a quick question for you, if that's okay, please. And that's, how important is it for us to remove the inequalities of language? So I come from a STEM background, and, you know, lots of the papers that are written by people who have English as their first language. And there is a tendency even now to think that a paper isn't as good, and I'm putting that obviously in inverted commas, if it's been written by somebody who doesn't have English as their first language. And that's not necessarily the case, but the people that are reviewing it read it and say, oh, well, you know, it's not written correctly. So how do you think we can start to dismantle that way of thinking by people who review papers for publication?
I mean, thank you for the question, Caroline. That's it's a big question. It's and I think it's on the one side you can answer that question, respond to that question very easily, and you can also give it a long answer. I mean, the first is who you're writing for, what the audience is. I think that the Poleno Tonje's critique is really that, and his concept of extroversion is really that the audience is a Western audience, that we write for the West. And I think that Ari Garuba's thing about circuits of value is that when one is writing, when one locates one's work in the particular circuit of value, then there are certain codes in that circuit of value that one needs to respond to. But the push, I think, from Escobar and also Mignolo and Dabashi, especially around pluriversality, is to recognize that there are other circuits of value. And I think that's what Oyeronke and also Elisio Macambo are pushing for, that what we need to do is to open up other circuits of value. There are other circuits of value where one is able to produce a knowledge, where one is able to create knowledge, where one is able to circulate a knowledge. And I think that what we need to do is also to invest in that kinds of infrastructure that are part of the ecosystem. And transformative partnerships, for example, to deal with these inequalities means that one needs to invest in circulating, in producing and circulating knowledge in other languages. And language not just as translation, because if you're going to produce knowledge as simply translation, as having people to do science in Bafut, you're not ending the violence. You're not ending the oppression. What you're doing is just transferring it from one place to the other. That's why investing in conceptual vocabularies and allowing science to be done in those spaces means that we transcend just language as communication, but we actually invest in epistemologies, invest in deep conceptual tools that are part of a phenomenological experience of being in a place. You see, so if you're writing from Bafut and you have to publish in a journal in the UK, you know, you could publish it in Bafut. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have shifted to other epistemological frameworks, or you've shifted to other conceptual frameworks. You're still locating it with in a particular circuit of value. So what we need to do is to expand it. It's not enough to say reviewers should not use language. I think when you publish in a circuit of value, there are certain rules, certain guidelines within that space, but we have to expand our knowledge archives, to expand to provide other spaces for production and circulation. But in order to do that, we need to invest. We need to invest. So you have a journal, you have a diction, you have concepts, you have reference, you have tools. In those, if you were publishing in Bafut, for example, it's an entire ball game. It's not enough to just teach people in Bafut. You need to invest in finding concepts that help to articulate the world while you translate the other side.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think you touch on a really, really important point there about things about circulation of the knowledge as well. So there's lots of work going on at the University of Bristol at the minute, and obviously other institutions within the UK looking at decolonisation, decolonising the curriculum. And again, a lot of STEM subjects say, you know, well, this is really difficult for us to do in regards to STEM subjects. And it's not, you know, there are things obviously that we are taking steps on at the minute, but to be able to tap into the knowledge that is currently happening, but also has previously happened as well, that has been completely overlooked. How can we get access to that knowledge when it hasn't been circulated as it should have to the global north? So if we type something into, you know, PubMed or whatever, and, you know, one of the databases that's commonly used, and these things don't come up. So one of the things we'd like to do for attendees for these sessions as well is obviously provide resources on how steps can be taken towards equitable collaborations. So is there some way that we'd be able to access journals that African researchers tend to publish in that don't come up in those big database searches? Is that something that you think would be possible and would be useful for people?
You know, I think social scientists and those who do work in the humanities are not very good at making recommendations, and always feel uncomfortable when they're asked to make a recommendation, because you're asking them to be able to be accountable for the money that is invested in them, and they don't like to do that very much. But let me just say that I think all knowledge is important knowledge. Every knowledge is important knowledge, for knowledge production, for humanity, for particular localities. And then what has happened over the past years, I think, is a conflation between scientific knowledge and knowledge. So I think in debates that have happened over the past years, every time we talk about knowledge, we're talking about scientific knowledge or knowledge in the university. And every time we talk about knowledge in the university, we think we're talking about all knowledges. And what has actually happened also is that we have placed scientific knowledge production as top on the hierarchy, as the most important form of producing knowledge. Also, what has happened is that we've also taken scientific knowledge production in the university as the most important form. So we've created a hierarchy of knowledges, which I think is the saddest thing that happened. You know, if I want to learn to be a musician, I actually understand, you know, playing music, which is a process of embodiment and a very deep apprenticeship. I don't need the university for that, you know? If I was going to learn to make chairs and to make tables and to do upholstery, I really need a good apprenticeship, which is a learning process and where I acquire knowledge and I become expert. But I don't need the university for that, you know? But if I was going to do research into upholstery, building upholstery, how it works and all that stuff, of course, I need to go to the university, you know, because there is abstraction and investment in research, and it's a particular pedagogy that is there. So I want to start there, that this is a conflation that we've made, and I think we really need to go back and ask when this happened. When did it happen that we created this hierarchy of knowledges, and where politicians think their knowledge is more important than those in the university, where those in the development sector think that their knowledge is more important than it's an ecosystem. And I think that in this ecosystem, we all contribute value. And if what we have to see is move to a point where we see ourselves as in a circle, or in a circle of conviviality, where those in the natural, in the STEMs, those in the social sciences, those in the humanities, those in arts, those outside of the university, in the business, the corporate sector, policy sector, they each make a contribution, you know, to knowledge production. The problem, especially, I think the challenge also with the critique of decolonization, as you've raised over the past years, is that it seems to have been circulating mainly, or to continue circulating in the social sciences or in the humanities. And oftentimes, I think we seem to think this is a humanities issue. It's like when I hear colleagues critique the disciplines and they say, "Oh, anthropology is complicit of colonization," and I think, what discipline wasn't, who wasn't here? So I think first we need to really dismantle that and begin to ask critical questions about when that hierarchy happens, but also understand the interdependency as a system and work with each other, for that. And then the other is really to work with those colleagues in STEMs. I think we're doing really critical work and very important work, because we shouldn't forget that a large part of the collaborations that we are talking about really happen in the STEMs sector, in medicine in particular, in mining, in environmental sciences. All this talk about Anthropocene, and how is that going to be possible if we are unable to understand this as an ecosystem and deal with this. And I think transformative collaborations is really about that also, to acknowledging transdisciplinarity as important, interdisciplinarity as important, pluriversality, as important, and begin to ask serious questions. I sometimes start off when I speak about the need for epistemologies and alternative epistemologies and decolonization, expanding knowledge archives. So I starting with 2015, when the students at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, and around the world were protesting. And during a meeting in the science faculty, a student stood up and said, "Science must fall, and that we must end science, and that science is responsible for lots of the problems in the world, and that in her view, she did not think that we needed science." And then she used the example of I think what was termed witchcraft, and that she would like to understand. But this student was castigated, If you read the newspaper stories and the accounts and all of that, the student was castigated instead of taking this as an important intervention for us in this space of STEMs to pull back and ask, what are we doing? What is this about? And how do we engage with this new shift? Because if you look at the history of knowledge production, it's always shifted. There's always been an attempt to ask critical questions about knowledge, right? From the time when people were locked up in the tower and said, they cannot say the world is spherical, to the periods in which we are now, times when the knowledge was infallible, to Foucault's thing about subjugated knowledges, to, if you look at the history of knowledge production in Europe itself, it's been a critique, a very deep critique, radical critique and shifting. And I think that's what we're doing. The critique is important for humanity, and it is in all spheres: STEMs, humanities, social sciences, development sector, corporate sector, policy, and all this.
Definitely, thank you. So the importance of the collaboration between the different disciplines, I think, really holds the key to this, and get that diverse thinking from every sectors that we are involved in. One final question, because we're coming to the end of the session now, I'm afraid, is how important is it to go beyond equitable partnerships at this moment in time? That's a quick question to finish.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think that what is being done now for to balance the relationships, research relationships between within the North, within the South, between the North and the South and North is very important. But we really need to move beyond just having to have administrative shifts. The epistemological changes are really important because they shape what thinking is. By investing, I think, in these in transforming these relationships, I really think that we are doing a huge contribution to humanity. And as we have an opportune moment right now with what is happening globally, we've seen with COVID-19, we have seen with hundreds of years of pushing for a development as a single foreign policy, what that is doing and continues to do to humanity. And I think that there are lots of important discoveries and scientific work that we don't have access to, that we did not have access to, that we shall never have access to unless we are able to open up these relationships. So this is the opportune moment, you know, to take this commitment seriously and put epistemologies, scientific knowledge, production, take our commitment to universal science more seriously than we talk. If we say science is universal, then why is the science of developing countries just for development and for science policies? So every time decoloniality is raised, we say, no, science is the universal, but the funding is meant for development assistance. So there's a contradiction, and I think this is the moment, you know, for humanity.
Thank you. I think that's a very hopeful way to end the session today. So thank you very much for that. We've come to the end of this session, I'm afraid. I just want to say a massive thank you to Divine again for coming along and talking to us. Our next session is on the 23rd of May, and we'll be talking about the development frame. The Eventbrite link for the booking is now open, and Rob is going to put that in the chat. Thank you very much. And we'll also send it out in an email afterwards as well to people who have signed up. We very much welcome your feedback on how useful these sessions are, and to help us plan further events to look into these aspects further. So if you could take 1 to 2 minutes to answer a very short questionnaire, which we will send the link to as well, we would be really, really grateful for that, please. And also we will send out some links as well to the Institute for Humanities in Africa website, and also the Park website and the IRC website. Thank you very much for everybody who has attended today. Thank you very, very much, Divine. I've got lots of food for thought, and I'm going to go this afternoon and think about things a little bit further. So thank you very much for coming along today.
Thank you. My pleasure.